street photography is challenging, especially when you are just starting. It can feel uncomfortable or even intimidating to point your camera at someone on the street. That's why many photographers prefer to start with a longer focal length to avoid these situations and shoot from a further distance rather than getting close to their subjects. But what does getting close really mean? There is a famous quote by photographer Robert Capa that says, "If your photos aren't good enough, you're not close enough." And this has led to this belief that if a photo isn't taken from a close distance, it's not a good one. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that approach. However, I prefer Alex Webb's interpretation of this quote. He says, "I always chosen to interpret Capa's saying expansively to mean not necessarily getting physically close, but getting emotionally, spiritually, or psychologically close. In this more expansive sense, it seems to be good advice." And I love this approach. Photography, after all, is more than just lifting your camera and taking a picture. It is about connecting. So for me, even if I'm not physically close to my subject, I like to express that I'm fully committed to that photo or that particular moment in some meaningful way. A few months ago, I talked about how the 50mm focal length has been helping me to guide my photography in the direction I wanted. If you follow this channel or seen my photos on social media, you probably noticed that I'm drawn to abstractions, textures, and scenes, with light often being my main subject, not just people. But since I started with street photography, I always felt the need to get physically closer. I wanted to dive into that documentary and candid side of street photography. And this isn't just inspired by Capa's quote. I wanted to push myself beyond my comfort zone. That doesn't necessarily mean that I will change the way I shoot. Rather, it adds another layer to my photography. And that feels right, because as photographers and artists, stepping out of comfort zones and exploring new things is essential for growth. Now, setting philosophy aside, if you want to get closer to your subjects but feel anxious or intimidated about pointing your camera at someone, or if you wish to explore this style of photography, today I want to share with you 3 essential and basic tips that will help you to achieve it. But first, we have to talk about gear, because for this style of photography, gear is important. The key is to go unnoticed, and we can talk about gear the whole video, but I will keep it simple. Just use a small setup. You want to be almost invisible. Believe me, if you are walking around a city with a large setup, you will stand out and it will be harder for you to get close. So a small camera with a small lens is perfect. When it comes to lenses, some people prefer very wide options like the 28 or even the 21mm. Personally, I prefer the 35 because it hits the sweet spot for me, and actually is the one that I have. I use it with my X-T4, but if I want something even smaller, I will go with the Lumix GX80. And the Lumix GX80 is perfect because it's a very compact camera, and if I pair it with a pancake lens, the entire setup can fit into my pocket. Alright, let's go for the tips. Tip number 1, and this is a basic and obvious one, and is always have your camera ready. And by ready, I mean having it at chest level or eye level at all times. I missed so many incredible moments because my camera was at my side and turned off. So I learned the hard way that my camera must always be on and ready to shoot. Apply this when you are actively shooting, otherwise your arm will get really tired or you will get one single very good bicep. This tip is also great because it minimizes the movement needed if your camera is hanging from your neck or your side. You know, that movement of lifting the camera can draw attention, potentially breaking the moment or triggering an unexpected reaction. And when the camera is up there, you can pull off a winogrand. The winogrand is named after the great Gary Winogrand. And basically what you will try to do is act like you have no idea how your camera works. Pretend you are touching some dials or something and take the photo when the lens is facing the subject. This is great because if you accidentally run into a massive crowd, the winogrand is the perfect blending technique. Tip number 2 is fishing, and fishing is one of my favorite techniques. In photography, you can hunt or you can camp for a photo, and when you camp, you are essentially fishing, and when you are fishing, you are essentially camping. You are waiting for a subject to walk into your scene, and this is a patience game, but when you find the right scene, just wait for the right subject to walk by and take the photo. Just try not to be too obvious about taking the shot. What I always do is keep doing what I was doing after the subject leaves the scene, so I'm giving the impression that they weren't the focus of the photo. And tip number 3 is shooting from the hip. Shooting from the hip can be tricky at the beginning, but once you get used to the angles, it becomes a lot of fun. Shooting from the hip gives you that amazing perspective and gives your subject that main character energy, or even a rockstar vibe. Plus, I noticed that when I shoot from the hip, I go really unnoticed, so try to give it a go. And I wanted to add an extra tip, and that is always treat your subjects with respect. Some people say that street photography is intrusive or disrespectful. However, it is important to remember that street photography is an art form that captures the essence of everyday life. It's not about invading someone's privacy or making them feel uncomfortable. It's about just capturing the rawness or beauty and emotions of daily life. If you feel anxiety about getting close, try to approach it with a more positive mindset and be grateful for what you are seeing. If you make that switch, the anxiety will pass. You know, as photographers, it is important to approach this style of photography in this way, you know, showing a lot of respect and gratitude for the moments we are capturing. Alright, so for the ones who made it to the end of this video, I hope you find this useful. If you have your own tips for beginners, please share them in the comment section so other photographers can benefit. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.